This isn't some attack from the enemy, attack from Satan, attack from just some people that got mad and left the church. I'll just say it. I believe it's the judgment of God coming down. These are the words of a former elder from Solid Rock Church at Market Commons. And it's not anonymous. So welcome to the point. Let's get to it.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
As I have said in the beginning, there are many layers to this story, and you always have to consider the source, because there are new accusations coming out daily. Creators like Robbie Harvey are reporting right now that the FBI is moving swiftly. In fact, the FBI has already met and interviewed several key players in this story. He even released this clip allegedly from John Paul's right hand, Trisha Ross.
Okay, coward. If you want to talk to me, I'll be happy to talk to you in person. So go with your threats and whatever else you need to do. But I am not fearful of anyone, and don't bring my family into anything.
And Magnolia, who works with JLR and creates content on YouTube, has said their sources are telling them they have also gotten visits from the FBI, and those investigators are more interested in the events that led up to April 27th. And she also said, according to their sources, the feds were already investigating Solid Rock Church because Mica had stumbled onto some shaky stuff with the finances and reportedly told it to the IRS. And when a church that size has a reported $5.5 million real estate portfolio, it does tend to make you wonder, how does such a small church that before this event was relatively unknown, according to people in my comment sections who claim to be from the area, amass such a wealthy portfolio, especially when you hear some of these sermons that were given? Now, I'm not a biblical expert, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the Bible mention that husbands should love their wives and not be harsh or be quick to anger? I'm just asking for a friend. So to be fair, when you look at all these text messages and videos, it's easy to see and understand why so many people would be tempted to speak out erroneously while remaining anonymous. And I don't want to give the impression on here that all those people speaking anonymously are telling lies or bending the truth. I'm simply saying those individuals can't be held liable, which is why when someone does speak out and we have a name and a face, those words should be heavily considered. Because a former elder named Bernard spoke out and said some pretty concerning things. Now, in terms of the validity of his comments, let's just get the negatives out of the way right now. He is a registered SO, and according to him, it's not illegal for him to be in the position he was in at the church. And if it was illegal for him to be doing that, I don't think he'd be willing to speak out in this manner. But does he have motive to publicly distance himself? It may very well be he felt like he was in a situation where when the walls start crumbling in, all the leadership within that organization was going to start pointing the fingers at him. That is absolutely a possibility. But I'm highly curious to know from all of you right now, how worried would you be a registered SO is near your kids at church? And if you feel like your voice matters and an open conversation is something you prefer, hit that like button and leave a comment down below. Because having a registered SO work at that church does make me question some of John Paul's decision making. Because who was the primary decision maker at that church? You would naturally think it would be John Paul. Since according to Bernard, if you had an issue in that facility, you went to John Paul. And to explain a question in my last video about why did these people leave that church, why didn't they stay and fight? Well, he also goes on to say that if you have a problem with JP himself, your only option at that point is to leave the church. Because the reports online allegedly say John Paul not only owns the church, he owns the land the church is on. And we also got some alarming statements about that very large real estate portfolio that need to be talked about. Now, it's my understanding if you're an elder at a church, you're involved with many of the day-to-day functions, which would include reviewing finances and handling issues with the budget. But what was kept from Bernard, who was at one point in time an elder? That reported $5.5 million real estate portfolio. The big question here is why? What is the reason to keep all that secret or keep it protected if everything was done legally? Now, as a person who was put in a leadership role, you would think that Bernard was very close to John Paul's inner circle, which is why his reasoning for leaving the church on May 4th is so interesting. Now, sit down when you hear this, because he goes on to say he doesn't think Mica's passing was related to her mental state. Now, listen to this and tell me what you think down in the comments below. Kenerson said he got a phone call from John Paul's assistant at about 11:15 p.m. the night she passed. She sounded sad, distraught, and told me she was on the way to JP's house and that I had to get her message ready for Sunday morning, Kenerson said. I remember one of the first things I said was, "This is bad. This is really bad." And then I just sat down to concentrate on a message. Less than 10 minutes later, he received a text message saying that John Paul planned to take the pulpit on Sunday morning. I didn't think that was a good idea, Kenerson said. I wasn't necessarily surprised. 3 days after that sermon, Kenerson was attending an elders meeting during which Solid Rock leaders were urged to stand by John Paul and weather the turmoil born out of Mica's passing. Charles Randall, John Paul's spiritual advisor and overseer of the church, was a key figure in that meeting. He was like, "We'll get through this and we'll be stronger than we were," Kenerson said, describing him as protective of John Paul and the church. As reports of John Paul's alleged behavior began circulating in the media, Kenerson said he was appalled. Just stuff that's come out that he's admitted to. I mean, for somebody that's not even a Christian, those things are appalling and shouldn't happen, he said. And for somebody that's a Christian, even more so. And for some who's a pastor, even more so. He wasn't the man I thought he was. Kenerson said John Paul kept a thick notebook documenting all of Mica's health issues and would page through it at times. That, Kenerson said, was part of his manipulation in controlling the narrative around his wife. "The biggest hurt I experience is Mica's passing," Kenerson said. "Whatever it turns out, I don't know whatever happened with that. I'm looking forward to the full investigation and us getting to the truth about that." As recently as a month ago, Kenerson said Solid Rock's 2 services would draw nearly 700 people. These days, according to Kenerson, it's about less than 50. Now, of course, everything is alleged until proven in a court of law. But let's be honest, this isn't the typical behavior you would expect to find out about your pastor. Now, if what he said about that notebook is true, I gotta ask, what does that say about him as a husband? Who keeps a notebook documenting every single flaw of their spouse? Much less be in the middle of a meeting and flip through it. If that's true, that's absolutely 100% disturbing in my own opinion. But a lot of us have wondered about Solid Rock's silence. Why haven't they spoken out? Why haven't they responded to any of these requests for interviews? Especially when you consider none of them been charged right now. Well, Bernard says that sounds like them, but he don't think that silence will last. Which may very well mean we have our first chink in the armor in this particular story. Certainly public pressure's not slowing down at all in the search for answers. But do you believe this guy? He certainly has reasons to get out in front of this thing and distance himself. But to speak publicly when so many others won't absolutely speaks volumes in my own opinion. Let me know where you stand down in the comments below. Y'all be safe now.